Born into a world where heroes are destined, not created, Ein is burdened with a cursed ability that marks him as weak and insignificant in the eyes of everyone around him. Rejected and scorned by society, he's unexpectedly granted a rare second chance at life, and with this opportunity, Ein resolves to embark on a path of redemption, determined to prove that even someone like him can rise to the ranks of a true hero. This story begins with Ein, injured and broken, standing at the edge of a cliff. Blaming himself for being too weak, he finds relief in knowing that this will finally be the end. Ein throws himself off the edge, questioning if his life ever had meaning. As the wind rushes past him, he reflects on his failures, lamenting how he was never able to accomplish anything. In his last moments, he reflects on the cruel way he was treated, convinced that his life was the worst. People saw him as nothing more than garbage, and now he will die as they always thought of him, like trash. A while earlier, we see a warrior battling a giant rat monster. He fights skillfully, but grows impatient as his mage partner takes her time completing an incantation. But when she finally casts her fireball, it obliterates the beast in a fiery display. With the fight over, the warrior smugly calls for their team's trash picker, who turns out to be Ein. Trying to maintain some dignity, Ein insists his name isn't trash picker, but he trips, drawing ridicule from his teammates. And the mage sneers that they should pity him instead because he isn't high common class like they are, and instead she cruelly labels him as low common garbage. Ein apologizes for stumbling, blaming the load he's carrying, but Zoid the warrior snaps at him to hurry up and appraise the beast. In this world, Ein's occupation is the low common appraiser, a position at the very bottom of society's hierarchy. Here the goddess of light assigns jobs at birth, while the goddess of darkness grants skills. Skills can be honed through training, but jobs are inherited and unchangeable, passed down through families for generations. Jobs fall into 3 tiers. At the top is the rare tier, reserved for exceptionally talented individuals like military strategists and wealthy merchants. The middle tier, which is highly common, includes fighters like swordsmen and mages, as well as people like Ein's teammates Zoid and Jolene. At the bottom lies the low common tier, which consists of peasants, laborers, and appraisers deemed unfit for combat. Children usually inherit their parents' jobs, but Ein lost his parents early on and couldn't follow in their footsteps. So with no family trade to carry on, he chose to become an adventurer, dreaming of wealth and success. However, reality crushed those dreams, leaving him stuck in a role no one respects. Using his appraisal skill, Ein examines the giant rat, finding it has an F rating for rarity, the lowest possible rank. However, its incisors are rated D, making them slightly more valuable. Struggling to pull out the tooth, Ein asks Zoid for assistance. Insulted by the very idea, Zoid declares he'd never touch a filthy rat, and Jolene chimes in to remind Ein that dealing with trash is the trash picker's job. Zoid grows increasingly irritated with Ein, pelting him with a rock when he dares to glare back. The frustration boils over as Zoid kicks Ein to the ground, asserting his dominance. Jolene then coldly lectures Ein, saying he should be more grateful since they're the ones protecting him. Left with no choice, Ein swallows his pride and apologizes, knowing full well that fairness doesn't exist in this world. As Ein continues appraising the rat, his teammates mock him relentlessly. Jolene sneers at the disgusting task, unable to hide her disdain as Ein reaches into the rat's mouth to retrieve the incisor. Ein can only agree with them, knowing that his sole value lies in carving materials from monsters, and it's a job that feels no better than digging through garbage. Zoid, never missing a chance to belittle him, mocks that Ein is only in the party because Zoid refuses to dirty his magic bag with disgusting monster parts. The dude taunts him, calling him trash picker boy, and orders him to hurry up so they can move on. Powerless to resist, Ein obeys, enduring the humiliation because survival demands it, and for someone like him, picking through filth is the only path to staying alive. That not long after, Zoid spots the corpse of a hellhound and can barely contain his excitement. Wasting no time, he sends Ein to harvest his parts. But Ein hesitates because guild intel stated that hellhounds shouldn't even be in this dungeon. But Zoid, as usual, dismisses Ein's concerns, barking at him to stop thinking and start working. And then the two start laughing and fantasizing about how much money they'll make from the loot. Ein then reluctantly appraises the hellhound, discovering that its parts have a B rarity, and begins dismantling it. But before he can finish, Zoid notices another hellhound nearby and gleefully demands Ein handle that one too. But this time, Ein freezes in fear because his instincts tell him something is horribly wrong. According to the guild map, there should only be a single corridor here, yet reality contradicts it. But Zoid waves him off, claiming the map must simply be incorrect. Ein insists it's a bad omen, and he urges the group to leave, but Zoid snaps, telling Ein to leave if he's so scared. Tired of what he calls backtalk, Zoid threatens to fire Ein on the spot, and he ups the stakes by declaring that if Ein doesn't follow orders, he won't even pay him for the work he's already done. And he tells him that this is his last chance to change his damn mind. Trapped in a no-win situation, Ein has no choice but to comply because his low-tier job makes him an undesirable teammate, and finding another party willing to take him in would be nearly impossible. And as much as he despises Zoid and Jolene, sticking with them is his only option for survival. Filled with fury and frustration, Ein swallows his pride once again, painfully aware of the harsh truth that life for him will never be fair. A while later, Zoid is ecstatic when they stumble upon a pile of slain hellhounds. Ein, however, is deeply worried, questioning what could have taken down such high-level monsters. If it had been adventurers, they would have collected the valuable items. Zoid, uninterested in thinking too hard, dismisses the concern, but Ein is horrified when he notices several living hellhounds nearby. The two jerks finally realize the danger they're in, and Ein deduces the pack was likely fighting over food. Jolene panics and admits that they couldn't defeat even one of these beasts, so they decide to flee. But escape seems impossible, and Zoid hatches a sinister plan. With malice in his eyes, he orders Jolene to cast a paralyzed spell on Ein. Ein is horrified, pleading with her, but Jolene reluctantly agrees, apologizing as she explains she isn't ready to die yet. She casts the spell, immobilizing Ein, and then says if he's lucky, the paralysis might wear off in time for him to escape. Zoid, showing no remorse, slams his foot onto Ein and cruelly declares to the pack that dinner is served. So Ein is helpless and can only watch in terror as they abandon him. His faint pleas for help go unanswered, and the pack descends, tearing into him. The excruciating pain breaks the paralysis, allowing Ein to defend himself. In desperation, he tosses his bag, spilling apples that distract the beasts long enough for him to escape. Limping as fast as his battered body allows, Ein is horrified to discover his treacherous teammates have blocked the exit. Realizing he's been trapped, he spots another corridor and takes it, only to find it leads to a dead end. Behind him, the growls of the hellhounds grow louder, so Ein is left with two impossible choices: leap off the cliff or be torn apart. In that moment, Ein bitterly laughs, blaming his birth as a lowly appraiser for his miserable fate. He became an adventurer hoping to change his life, but all he found was mockery and betrayal. Despite bowing to the mockers, he was still abandoned. He blames his appraisal skill for his plight, but starts to wonder if it's truly at fault or if the world itself is to blame. Just then, in a rare moment of clarity, Ein realizes the harsh truth. He is the one to blame. He spent his life blaming his job, his circumstances, and everyone else while running away and placing limits on himself. Unfortunately, it's too late, but Ein has realized that his weakness is his own fault. Ein then takes the plunge, echoing his earlier words. He was treated like garbage, and now he will die like trash. Moments later, Ein wakes in an unfamiliar place, his unconscious body having been transported elsewhere, as a mysterious woman approaches him and gently kisses his forehead. When he stirs awake, he is stunned to find himself alive, with all his injuries somehow healed. Rising to his feet, he notices an enormous tree nearby, surrounded by towering walls of water. So he gets intrigued and uses his appraisal skill on a droplet fallen from the tree. The results leave him speechless because it's a droplet from the World Tree. Appraising the tree itself, he confirms it is indeed the legendary World Tree, a revelation that stuns him because he had always thought it was nothing more than a myth. The legend speaks of a time when the world had a single World Tree. It provided the mana people breathe in from the atmosphere and convert within their bodies to use magic. Supposedly, the World Tree withered away long ago, leaving scholars puzzled as to how mana still exists. Some theorize the existence of other World Trees, but despite exhaustive exploration above ground, none were ever found. It makes sense now. No one ever thought to look so deep in an obscure dungeon. Ein concludes that the tree must have saved his life. Bowing his head, he sincerely thanks it, but just then he hears a faint voice nearby. Looking around, he finds no one and decides to ignore it. He's also surprised by the absence of monsters in the area. Faced with the uncertainty of his situation, Ein begins to ponder his next move. He knows his treacherous teammates won't send for help, and with no food or supplies, he has few options. Determined to survive, Ein resolves to move forward. With one last look, he thanks the World Tree again before continuing into the unknown. As Ein moves forward, the mysterious girl from before appears, watching him with concern. This is clearly uncharted territory, as none of it matches the guild map. Ein grows increasingly anxious, fearing that monsters even stronger than the Hellhounds might lurk nearby, because those monsters messed him up pretty well. But despite his fears, he gathers himself, determined to push forward. His near-death experience has changed him, and he vows to never again place limits on himself. Armed with nothing but a rock, Ein cautiously navigates the dungeon. To his surprise, he encounters no monsters, a relief that allows him to focus solely on finding an exit. But the nightmare is far from over because out of nowhere, something chops off Ein's ear. The pain is excruciating as he scrambles to recover it, but before he can, his fingers are severed by another attack. Ein panically uses his appraisal skill on his attacker and is horrified to discover it's an S-rank gremlin. The creature strikes again, tearing into him, and Ein is painfully reminded that knowing an opponent's rank doesn't make him strong enough to fight it. Ein then desperately tries to flee, but the gremlin overwhelms him. Just as it moves in for the kill, it suddenly freezes, trembling in fear. Ein watches in disbelief as the gremlin is crushed, and his horror deepens when he sees the cause, an S-rank death bear. The colossal beast wastes no time clawing through Ein's face and destroying one of his eyes. As the bear begins to crush him, Ein resigns himself to death. But just before the end, a mysterious boy appears, intervening to save him. The boy, clearly irritated, mutters about being begged by a girl to help Ein. He makes it clear he's not doing it out of kindness, and tells Ein not to get the wrong idea. Ein's strength fades and he loses consciousness, and when he awakens, Ein is back by the world tree. He then gets stunned and realizes his ruined eye has been replaced, and all of his injuries have been healed once again. Then as he sits up, he finally sees the mysterious girl who's been watching over him. Her beauty leaves him speechless, to the point that he compares her to the elves from fairy tales, while she offers him a gentle smile. Ein struggles to make sense of what's happening when a woman appears behind him and demands that he show proper gratitude and drink the tea Yuri made for him. Ein confusedly looks around and finally notices Yuri holding a cup of tea, offering it with a shy smile. Ein hesitates, suspicious of what the tea might contain, but before he can object, the woman Ursula forces it down his throat. To his surprise, the tea tastes incredible, so Ein compliments Yuri, who beams with happiness, and he finds her even cuter when she's smiling like that. However, Ursula warns him with a deadly glare that she'll erase his entire existence if he dares have a single inappropriate thought about Yuri. Ein quickly nods, taking the threat very seriously. Moving on, Ein asks if it was the two of them who saved him from the death bear. Ursula scoffs, saying she has no interest in protecting a smelly human like him, but Yuri had begged her to step in, leaving her no choice. Ein feels grateful and thanks Yuri for caring about him. Yuri blushes in embarrassment, but her moment of shyness is short-lived as Ursula misinterprets his tone as flirting. So she delivers a swift dropkick to his face, following it up by stomping on him while accusing him of hitting on her daughter. As Ein recovers, he's shocked to learn that Ursula is Yuri's mother. Ursula corrects him, explaining that she's actually Yuri's guardian, a role she's fulfilled since Yuri first planted her roots in this forest. Yuri may appear human, but she's actually the spirit of this world tree, one of 9 that exists in the world. So Ursula's duty is to protect Yuri from any threats. Ein is amazed to learn that Yuri is the world tree's spirit, but it clicks for him since he finds her so beautiful. Unfortunately, the compliment embarrasses Yuri again, prompting Ursula to kick Ein back to the ground, accusing him of staring at Yuri with lecherous eyes. Apologizing profusely, Ein tries to move on but suddenly remembers something. He can still see despite having his eyeball torn out by the death bear. Ursula explains that she healed him using the tears of the world tree, which have remarkable healing properties. However, even the tears couldn't regenerate his crushed eyeball. Instead, Yuri selflessly offered a part of the world tree to create a new eye for Ein, allowing him to see again. Ein expresses his deep gratitude once more, but curiosity gets the better of him. He asks Yuri why she was so concerned about him when they barely know each other. Yuri explains that it's because he thanked her when he fell into this place. While it's rare for people to end up here, a handful of incidents have occurred where individuals fell to their doom. Yuri always saved them, but none ever thanked her. Instead, as soon as those people realized she was the world tree, they selfishly exploited her, collecting her water and tearing off her branches and leaves to sell for profit. Ein, however, was the first person to treat her with genuine respect, which made her take a liking to him. Despite her fondness for Ein, Ursula interjects, reminding them that he isn't supposed to be here and insisting he leave immediately. Yuri pleads with Ursula not to send Ein back into the dungeon, knowing he'd surely die. Ursula, however, remains indifferent, saying that what happens to Ein is none of her concern. Yuri, desperate to save him, begs Ursula to find a way to guarantee his safe return. Unfortunately, Ursula explains her hands are tied. As the world tree's guardian, she cannot stray too far from Yuri, and she also notes that teleportation magic doesn't work in this dungeon. Devastated by the lack of options, Yuri begins to cry. Seeing her tears, Ursula finally relents and comes up with an alternative. She declares that she will personally train Ein until he's strong enough to make it out of the dungeon on his own. Yuri, relieved and grateful, thanks Ursula for agreeing to help. Ein, overwhelmed by gratitude and joy, hugs both of them tightly. However, Ursula quickly pushes him away, irritated by the affection. Pulling herself together, Ursula warns Ein that her training will be hellish, the kind only one of the world's greatest sages can deliver. And she makes it clear that she won't tolerate laziness or half-hearted efforts, so Ein nods solemnly, swearing to give his all. When Ursula leaves him outside to begin training, Ein starts to feel uneasy. As she walks away to prepare, he nervously wonders if her idea of training might involve throwing him straight into battle with monsters by himself. Just then, Ursula informs Ein that she expects him to fight monsters on his own as it's the quickest way for him to learn. For his first task, she points out a gremlin in the distance and tells him to start there, but the problem is that Ein can't see anything. Ursula reminds him that his left eye was replaced with a piece of the world tree, urging him to try using it. Still, even with his spirit eye, Ein sees nothing but darkness. So Ursula explains that Ein lacks the awareness to fully utilize the spirit eye's potential. Reflecting on how he lost his original eye and how Yuri helped restore it, Ein focuses deeply. And when he opens his eyes again, the world looks brighter and clearer than ever before, so now he can finally see the gremlin lurking far ahead. So Ursula announces it's time to begin training, and without warning, she throws a rock at the gremlin, provoking it into charging toward them, and tells Ein his first task is to dodge its high-speed attacks. Ein panics, saying it's impossible because the gremlin is too fast for him to follow. Ursula dismisses his complaints, telling him to use his appraisal skill to analyze its movements. Skeptical, Ein reluctantly tries it out, and to his amazement, the appraisal skill highlights the gremlin's attack patterns in real time. However, knowing where the attacks will land is useless if he doesn't actually dodge them. When the gremlin cuts him, Ursula activates a barrier to halt the battle. She then pulls out a vial of tree drops borrowed from Yuri, pouring on Ein's severed ear. After it reattaches, she warns him to take this seriously, as repeated injuries will only prolong his suffering. With the barrier down, the gremlin resumes its assault, but this time, Ein ducks just in time to avoid its attack. After a week of grueling training, Ein has finally learned to anticipate the gremlin's movements and dodge its attacks every time. Proud of his progress, Ein announces to Ursula that he's completely mastered the technique. However, his confidence makes him careless because the gremlin sneaks behind him and slashes his back, catching him off guard. Laughing at his pain, Ursula erects another shield around them so they can take a break. Though she thoroughly enjoys seeing him in pain, she admits that he has done well and tells him that he's passed the first test. Now it's time for the next lesson, and Ursula informs Ein that he has to defeat the gremlin. Ein is willing to try, but he's quick to point out that without a combat job, killing an S-rank monster is impossible for him. Ursula anticipated this and explains that while it would indeed be impossible with his bare hands, he won't have to rely on them, and she reveals that she crafted a special sword for him. Ursula adds that she didn't want to make the sword herself, but Yuri went through the effort of snapping off one of her branches to provide the materials, all because she wanted to help him. Ein is deeply moved that Yuri would endure such pain for his sake. Swearing to make good use of the sword, he thanks her sincerely. With that, Ursula drops the barrier and leaves Ein to face the gremlin alone. He charges at the creature, but it effortlessly dodges his initial swing. Ursula is unimpressed and teases him by saying that he'll never hit the gremlin if he keeps swinging so slowly. Ein knows she's right and tries a new tactic, predicting the gremlin's path and timing his attack for when it gets close. However, the gremlin easily jumps over his blade, proving it's smart enough to avoid predictable moves. Realizing he needs a better strategy, Ein decides to take his appraisal skill further. Instead of simply predicting the gremlin's movements, he focuses on analyzing every detail of its attack. He digs deep, activating what he calls a super appraisal as the gremlin charges at him. And suddenly the creature seems frozen in time, but in reality, Ein's spirit eye is appraising its movements so quickly that it feels like slow motion. With such a clear view of the gremlin's attack, Ein calmly prepares himself and lands a clean hit, whacking it in the face and defeating it. Ein is ecstatic about defeating his first monster, but Ursula cuts his celebration short, reminding him this is only the beginning. For the next phase of training, Ursula tasks Ein with defeating over a dozen more gremlins, and Ein feels confident after his success, so he immediately gets to work. After several grueling hours of battling, Ein finally finishes taking down all the gremlins. Exhausted but proud, he turns to Ursula, expecting well-deserved praise. However, she brushes off his accomplishment, saying that this level of performance should be normal for someone who can harness the power of a world tree. Still, she acknowledges his steady progress and decides he's ready for the next step. Ursula then instructs Ein to appraise the gremlin's ability and make it his own, but Ein gets confused and protests that appraisal only provides information about skills, and it doesn't allow him to learn them. Ursula explains that humans typically learn skills through constant practice, but with his spirit eye, Ein should be able to see not just the information, but also the experience tied to the skill. This allows him to instantly acquire it. Ein then curiously decides to give it a try and appraises the gremlin's high-speed movement ability. And as soon as he does, a massive headache overwhelms him as an enormous amount of information floods his mind. Dropping to his knees in pain, he struggles to endure the overload. But when the headache finally subsides, he realizes that he has successfully acquired the gremlin's skill. And he is in disbelief that he learned the skill too quickly, and to test it out, Ein takes off running down the dungeon hall, amazed at how much faster he's moving than before. But there's a serious problem. His body isn't accustomed to moving at such high speeds, and within seconds, the strain tears every muscle fiber in his body, leaving him crumpled in agony. Ursula calmly catches up to him, pouring some of the World Tree's tear drops on his broken body to heal him. She then explains that if his body can't handle the force of the skill right now, the only solution is to keep practicing until it adapts. She then begins an intense training regimen where Aim repeatedly uses the skill until his muscles tear, and she heals him over and over. This continues until Aim's body finally stops breaking under the strain. His muscles grow stronger, and he can now fully use the skill without hurting himself. Feeling confident, Aim wonders if he might finally be ready to challenge the Death Bear. Ursula scoffs at his overconfidence, warning him that even with his current progress, he'd still get demolished if he tried to face the beast now. Ursula then points out that while Aim's speed and agility have improved, he still lacks the attack power needed to take on stronger foes. So to remedy this, she offers him the opportunity to copy one of her own abilities. Aang gets excited and eagerly asks what her ability is, and Ursula responds by casually blasting him with a fireball. She explains that her skill, Discard Enchant, allows her to cast magic without requiring a chant. Aim is immediately impressed, thinking it's an incredibly powerful skill. He's eager to learn it, but Ursula adds a condition. He must appraise the ability while dodging one of her fireballs because she finds it amusing. Then, as Ursula fires another fireball, he appraises her attack mid-flight, successfully acquiring the Discard Enchant ability. However, he fails to dodge in time and is hit squarely by the fireball, collapsing in agony. Ursula heals him yet again, and Aim begins training to cast magic without incantations. Since Aim doesn't have a magic-oriented class, his mana reserves are pitifully low, and he exhausts his energy after just a few spells. But luckily, the Tears of the World Tree not only heal him, but also replenish his mana, while slightly increasing his magic capacity each time. However, mastering the technique will still take a great deal of practice. Then after 2 weeks of rigorous training, Aim finally achieves a breakthrough. He becomes capable of casting mid-level magic and is even able to unleash over 1,000 fireballs simultaneously. With his enhanced appraisal ability, new skills, and raw power, Ursula decides that Aim is finally ready to face another Death Bear. As Aim prepares to confront the monster, he feels nervous about the fight, but Ursula reassures him, saying that if he applies everything he's learned, the battle will be manageable. Then when the Death Bear charges, its claws swing toward Aim with deadly precision. Using his appraisal, Aim reads its movements and counters the point-blank wing cutter spell. The attack lands directly on the bear, dealing significant damage, though it's not enough to kill it. The bear roars in fury, but Aim doesn't give it a chance to recover. He immediately begins bombarding it with fireballs, one after another, until the beast is finally defeated. As he stands over the fallen monster, Aim is shocked at how easy the fight felt, and for a moment he wonders if the Death Bear was always this weak. But the truth is that Aim has become incredibly strong. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.